Hello everyone. In this video we're going to talk about the concept of open skirt. I know it's kind of a funny name, very catchy for the YouTube thumbnail, and very clickbaity. That's exactly what we like. The concept of open skirt, the name of open skirt, comes actually from the Japanese term suso aki. I'm guessing the person who came to the translation was having quite some fun, because the literal translation would be something more like opening at the hem, or like a hem gap. The open skirt concept means when you have a territory, it can be open on one or both sides. In that specific example, you can see that black would be able to jump on the second line on the left. White could, if it wants to, block. And so we're going to study if it's interesting to block, when you should block, if you're white, or should you expand your territory, your side even more? If you are black, should you reduce right away? Should you reduce on the top, from the bottom? Should you invade? What are all the keys? What are all the shape points? We are going to answer all those questions in this video. So we have this situation. Black just played at the top left. First, you may wonder how we came up to this situation. Well, it's quite simple. It was at first a sense invasion, then white blocked, and here we have the classic pattern that you may have seen in many games, in many modern games. White decided to approach the lower left corner, black answered, white took the extension, and now black played Atari and descent. Descent is actually quite important. If black were to play something like this, then white could hane and cut right here, and that would be quite deadly already. If black were to capture the stone, then this corner will be captured, and in the other hand, if black would to connect here, then stone will be captured in the ladder. So playing here for black actually is quite big. And now if you are white, you may be wondering, oh my god, what to do? If I don't block, then all my territory is gone. But if I block, it feels a bit slow, because it feels like black got to protect its weakness for free. Well, definitely blocking wouldn't lose you the game, but it's a bit low indeed. For example, now black could think about reducing from the top, and after that black could think about invading right here. And you see that slowly but slowly, step by step, the white territory is shrinking quite a bit. Meanwhile, black is building quite some territory on the top and also trying to attack the bottom left white stone. So now, what to do? Well, if you are white, you have to think of several concepts. First of all, and first concept, maybe the most important concept in Go, is that you try to play on the most open area. And in that case, the most open area would be the bottom side, because not only it's a big area, but it's also attacking the black corner right here. And so in of itself, that would be actually a bigger move than just blocking on the second line. But let's think locally, because I'm sure you are very scared about your territory locally. Well, in any case, a bigger move than blocking would be, for example, to play the Kema here. As you saw in the previous sequence, when white was blocking here, black was very happy to push from this side and increasing its own territory and decreasing the potential of the white territory. But here with this move, white is doing the exact opposite. But now you're like, okay, sure, but then black can still come to my territory, so what to do? That actually would be a fairly small reduction of your territory. Because now if you imagine the most simple answer, and I'm really talking like very simple, like something like this, for example. All black did was maybe gain 3 points, maybe not even, make you way stronger, and still the potential in the center is extremely open. In the meantime, black achieved nothing, and also the potential on the top is completely damaged and pretty much forever gone. So that kind of sequence, even though it looks a bit weird, because black is calling on the second line, is actually very good for white. But now black also may be wondering, okay, so why just approach here? Now what is my best move as black? Should I still be pushing from above? Should I be playing here? Should I be invading perhaps? Well, the way to think about that But in a very classic Go way, you always start to reduce from the top and then from the bottom. What do I mean by that? If let's say you start playing from this area, then as I said, white will answer something very easy. But now if you push from this side, now less likely that white will simply answer, because white is already very strong and white doesn't need to do much. And so perhaps white can even again tenuki and take a big move here, or even like attacking this corner. But now, if instead you start playing right away from here, it's unlikely that white can tenuki, because now obviously the attack would be much better against the 5 white stones. So it'd be much harder for white to tenuki. And so now if white does answer, let's imagine in such a way, again this would still be the best move, but at least it would make more sense. Because now, before reducing the bottom, black reduced the top, and as you can see now, the potential of white is much more limited, and black got to develop the top and to reduce the bottom. So that order of things is very important when it comes to Yosei. So let's say that black just pushed right here, and I may be wondering, okay, but finally now I can block here, right? Well, the same story would kind of apply, because here black would simply jump right here. Now you need to defend your territory, and black will probably take this big point right now. And you can see, actually here the white territory on the left is very limited, it's very contained, and there is really no chance of expansion. Because where could you play to make it bigger? If you try to play any move like this, I will simply answer all of your moves, and as you can see, the zone being surrounded by black is much bigger than the zone being surrounded by white. So that's why, again, we talk about reduction from above before reduction from below. And this is again why a move like this is still much bigger, because you are also reducing black's territory and maybe even creating some potential threats later with cuts and so on. So you will see many games where when black pushes like this, answering in a hane is often the best choice. What you never want to do is to passively answer here and give such move in sente. That's why instead of answering here, it would even be better to tenuki if you don't feel like, for example, playing hane here. Because now again, if black plays here and you defend like this, at least you didn't spend a move on the second line to defend some points which actually in the end are not so big, and at least you got a big point on the right. So now you may be wondering, okay, but so actually when is the actual timing for white to block on the second line? Well, in most programs, you will notice that it's actually very late. For example, let's imagine a game where black played this big point on the right. White rushes to play such a big move because this is really the key move. And again, let's imagine that black feels that he really wants to build something here. So for example, you would defend like this. Well, now already I would think that this is a good moment, a good time to block, because not only you got the block on second line, but you also got the reduction at the top, and now the potential of the white territory is much more open than before, because basically you got both sides. Normally, if it's like that, probably black would try to invade right here, or perhaps try to play right here or to invade. But answering in such a slow way would be very good and a good timing for white to now block. Now let's see this second example. In this example, white just played the extension on the top. And you can see it is only much later, after a big fight on the right, that actually they start to be again interested about the top left. So at this point, white just made a gigantic inference towards the center, and finally black pushes here. Again, a perfect example of what would happen if black would play here. Most likely white would actually just play this move right now, because again, even if you end up destroying this area, which looks big, but it's not that big compared to the ginormous potential that white can achieve in the center. And something like that would actually be much more scary to play against for black than if black had just come from above. And again, as you can imagine, here white cannot still block here, because then black would simply jump, white would most likely have to defend, and now in a few moves the whole potential of white would disappear. So here's a perfect example of how this can work also in a global level, than answering more efficiently, and to really put emphasis towards the center and towards the mutual reduction is very important. It is only at this stage of the game that black decided that it had reduced enough on the center, and then black played this one, white answered once, and black came back to reduce the center. So you see how late the timing for this move is. We are at move 60. You would imagine that white would have played it much sooner. Actually, white had a chance to play it. White played this, came out right here, so white technically could have played here. But here, again, actually the potential for the center for white is much bigger than defending that side. And so, for example, here, black would simply play a move along those lines, maybe even like make a reaction move around here, and simply play some normal moves that again are diminishing the potential of white quite hugely. Let's jump now to the third example of a similar situation. In this situation, you can see that black has a massive moyo on the bottom and right, and here it's white to play. White is pretty strong everywhere. It will be possible for white to jump right in on the right side, but white also chooses again to play with a very normal move, or trying to reduce the potential of black on the right, and in the meantime increasing its potential at the top. And here you will see a fighting version where white is cutting now, black defends in a very proper shape, and after the start of the fight here, black extends, white has to defend, and now a fight starts. It's again important to see right now that black became very, very thick with the whole group on the top right. Meaning that because black became so thick and so strong, it diminishes even furthermore the value of blocking on the right side on second line. Because now it's not even center for white, because even if white gets to play the jump right here, black would simply capture the stone, and the points that you are destroying as white is not even close to the value of capturing the center stones and all the potential center and all the potential territory you can make in the center. So it's really important to understand that the stronger you are, the less value jumping or blocking, depending on which player you are, has value. To conclude this first situation, I'm coming back to the first game I showed you. And I think the key to understand why those sequences are being played is to understand that actually those 5 white stones can either be very flexible or they can be a wall. Meaning that in only a few moves, there will be a powerful wall. On the other hand, if black is trying to attack them right away, it will also give white many good moves towards the black potential. And so an attack from black might actually hurt black more than it helped him. Because as you can see here, black shows attacking, but what is actually black aiming at is not even clear. That's why, in that sense, you would rather pressure white to connect in a dummy way than to try to attack up front and not even be sure about the gain that you are going to have. So, let's recap. You don't want to block as white too early in the game. You only want to block if you are already limited from the top and if your potential cannot grow anymore. And if black would actually jump on a second line, then you would lose all your points. That's when you want to block. If your potential is still quite big in the center, or if there is other big moves on the board, you actually want to play them and only to come back to block on the side when you deem it big enough. As black, again in this situation, you don't want to start reducing from the bottom. You always want to start reducing from the top. And then if the opponent answers, you can start again from the bottom. Even though, as we saw, the stronger the wall is, the least likely it is that the jump on the second line will be centered. So it's really a fine, thin balance, and you really have to calibrate it to perfection. This is why pros are really good at. They usually know what timing is good to protect a territory, to reduce a territory, to invade a territory. And all those concepts are linked together in this specific situation. So this concludes the first pattern I wanted to show you, which is, I think, nowadays one of the most common patterns you can find, especially in the Sansen Joseki. And now we are going to move on to a second situation, a second pattern, which is slightly more complicated, but I believe it's also very common, so you should try to grasp the main concepts coming from it. Now let's jump into the second situation I want to show you, which comes from this very famous Shimari Joseki. This big Shimari, black attaches, you have this hane, this cut, and you end up with this situation. If you want to have details about this specific Shimari, Go Magic has actually a lot of video about it. Some people might actually be wondering why is black not blocking on this side? It feels quite big. Then again, you would just have a wall facing a Oshi, a star point on the other side, but the gap between the two is huge, and white would have absolutely no problem coming in between and destroying everything. Or white could even use a more modern approach, which is to peep first and to play, for example, a move like this. And suddenly that wall turned more like into a baguette, and that baguette might even suffer later on. Obviously, that baguette is quite strong, and you might even end up also attacking the white stones, but you have to remember that also white got a very large amount of territory on the left, and so you do need a fairly big compensation regarding the influence, which is why black is not blocking right away, but black is taking the big point, the side star point. And now the same question as the previous position might come up: should white jump straight in? Well, here is clearly not the biggest move. When you look how open the board is, should you really end up playing a move on the second line? Well, I can think about this move being bigger. I can think about any move here being bigger. Or like even playing a sunrise, who knows? But clearly, what you are destroying here is not big enough. If you imagine something like this, and all you can get at the end is, for example, those 4 stones, it's really not big enough, and black would have taken many other big moves here. Because here, like, all white got is just points. Big points, that's for sure, but just points. So now, if you are white, you might wonder, okay, so how am I supposed to attack this group? Well, the first answer would be, don't do it right now. If I'm white, I can imagine other big moves on the board, such as entering the corner or approaching any of the Hoshi. Basically, playing on the right side would be more than enough. If you would like to approach this black wall, then you have to do it in a more active way. Again, a very modern way would be to simply play here. If black just plays here, then now you could actually jump right now. If black tries to cut you off, then you would be able to also jump, and now again you have the return of the baguette. And nobody wants the baguette, except the French, which I am. So of course black could also try to answer in a more dynamic way. For example, black could be like, okay, I don't care, take my 4 stones. But of course, you're not forced to take the 4 stones now. You might just play a big move on the board, or you might jump on the 3rd line. And if black plays here, you might again just play elsewhere, because you know that now you have a cut. So already this probing move can be quite annoying. Usually black would answer in several ways. Black can actually just connect, black can jump right here, black can also jump like this. There are many ways of answering. The main point is that this is an annoying move for black, which actually is why I was a bit surprised by this move. Technically, black should play here. That it avoids this move being so annoying, but obviously this is a 9p game, so who am I to judge? This also, of course, makes complete sense. So again, you can see this very important concept of you start reducing from the top and then from the bottom. So here you would rather start from here than from here. Obviously, as I said again, you might also just play tenuki right now because the board is very, very open and there are plenty of bigger options than just starting to poke at the black wall. I wanted now to show you this situation. As you can see, the same joseki happened on the top side, and now it's white to play. Here you can see that white got the extension at the top, so it would be fairly reasonable for white to block on the second line, because now you have nothing to worry about some weird invasion very deep, because you have both the extension, the wall, and the other part of the group, which is on the right side. So would you play it now? Would you play something else? Well, here, for example, again, you have to apply the same principle. In the game, white played here, because again, it's the border of the two moyo. If black were, for example, to play something here, and white is trying to reduce, in the meantime, black can also build something quite big, and both moyo would be fairly even, but black has more territory. If now you think about playing this one first, and black starts to get jealous, and for example reduces now, well, you could still play a very big move around here. You might even start actually attacking this stone, and suddenly the balance of points and of territory has shifted, but it's much more dynamic for white. And now, to show you a more advanced situation of this same game, here you can see that the game has developed a lot. There was some fighting. White indeed got in the left territory, and it's black to play. And as you can see, the white territory at the top can hardly make any more developments. And so finally, black decided to jump right here, because now there is not much more to do for black in the center, in any other part of the board, and finally this move will be able to be sente. You will reduce white, because again, now it will be very difficult for white to play anything else. If white starts playing a big move, now all white pawns will disappear, because again, there is no potential in the center. So in that situation, yes, indeed, white has to answer, try to defend the few points that's on top. And now to conclude this second situation, here you can see that white is building a very big potential on the right side. And now it's black's turn. Well, here actually black has a few options. Black could double pincer on the bottom left. Black could continue the attack on the white stone on the top left. Or black could do something on the right side. And I think this situation where there is so many big moves really highlights even more how now playing here will be very, very small when you compare to white now being able to answer here, or white now being able to answer here. And like those moves are much bigger, because again, what is the follow-up for black locally? Not much. So in that game, black again followed the same principle, reducing from above, and also in the meantime making a probing move. And so black played this one, white answers, and now black comes back here. It is finally only much, much later than white now decided that there was no other big area to fight or no other big points, and finally white came back and blocked on the second line. Because now white cannot really expand much more in the center, also because in that specific case there was some very big agi. For example, let's say white would capture here, black would be able to play such moves that would reduce even more this territory, and that would be quite dangerous. So in that specific case, and also because it is coupled with reading, white decides to simply block like this. So that's it for today's video. I hope you got to understand the main concept that comes from the open skirt. Namely, I would say two of them are really important to remember. First of all, the fact that when you are facing a big moyo, you first want to reduce from the top and then reduce from the bottom, or let's say from the sides. And the other one is the double reduction. meaning that a move that will increase your potential and decrease your opponent's potential is usually very valuable, and of course the same goes for your opponent. And often that specific move is the same for both players. As I mentioned in this video, we only went over two very modern examples, but it can really apply to pretty much anything of the sort. I do hope that you got to understand those specific situations a bit more, that you will be able to apply those concepts in the future, and see you for the next video.
By the way, you can also watch these lessons on our platform, gomagic.org. Except there, you'll watch them with interactive quizzes right within the lessons and practical exercises right after them. And if you enjoy watching these Go videos and you don't want to miss others like this one, go smash that like button, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and this is Go Magic.